Yo, my peoples, what's up? Welcome back to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life. I am your host, Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest chat with friends. This is a very unique opportunity at an interview, and I'm very, very excited to share. So, a couple of weeks ago, if you watch my channel on Shelf Stories, I did a video addressing a situation with an abstract game called Garinto. And, you know, Twitter kerfuffle, blah, blah, blah. We'll go into all that in a second. But, you know, there are real people that are bringing you these games, that are designing these games. I reached out to one at the, you know, after they put out a post saying, you know, they're willing to talk. I'm willing to talk too. So I reached out, and this person jumped right on it and was willing to come on and hash out whatever issues that we have. So without further ado, the publisher of Garinto, the founder of Grand Gamers Guild, hailing from Eastern Michigan. So we're barely in the same time zone, so we're making it work. His name is Mark Spector. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So yeah, this is going to be fun.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it. So a couple things about this particular episode. I think we need to kind of lay some groundwork. So first of all, I am a content creator, and I have worked with Grand Gamers Guild before. You see up on this right here, there was a game called Endangered. I love this game. I did a podcast about it, did a playthrough video about it on the One Stop Co-op Shop. By the way, welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast as well. It's a game, I got it as a review copy. I loved it, and I'm going to request the expansion, New Species, when the time comes around. And I have best man on screen. He's going to come through for me, right?
You're already on my list, my friend.
Yes.
I'm actually, just to divert a little bit, what Joe has done with making the scenarios feel unique, I think is going to blow you out of the water. So anyway, carry on.
We shall see. But this is a previous relationship. We're not like friends or anything, but it's a professional, you know, content creator, media partner relationship, right? So that is pre-existing before now. So I want to continue this relationship. So this is not any kind of like gotcha thing. So like I also have a reputation for being on the progressive side of things, for making criticism. People saw my video. They were like, Jason, calm down, breathe. I was a little bit heated. However, I mean, at the end of the day, this is about just community, and, you know, criticism is not cancellation. I will say that a couple of times. If I have criticism, that does not mean that we're canceling anything. It's just, let's hash this out. That is the spirit in which I want to have this conversation. So having said that, there are a couple of issues with the game Gorinto. We're going to talk about issues of cultural appropriation. We're going to talk about issues of, you know, who gets to make what games, and, you know, all the stuff, and also the blog that started a lot of this. So we are going to get into all that. So let's just lay some track for people who just, maybe they don't even know. You know, you look at Twitter, it's only a couple hundred people. This podcast is going to reach around 2,000 people. So maybe some people don't know. So let's go one step at a time. Garinto, just tell me what it is, and, you know, just give me the publisher pitch on what Garinto is.
Sure. So it's a lightly themed in the Japanese culture abstract game. So in the vein of things like Azul and Reef, and you know, for people who like abstract games, Garinto should be up your aisle.
It is a game for 1 to 5 players.
Yep. 1 to 5 players, plays in I don't know, anywhere from probably half an hour to 45 minutes. Essentially, you know, we have the primary board is called the mountain, and outside the mountain you have the path, and you move tiles from the path to the mountain, and you gather tiles based on how you move a tile in unique patterns. And there are differing goals in the game, so that while the core mechanisms are the same, the game should play out a little bit differently every time. One thing I'm also really proud of about the game is that it actually plays differently at every player count. So solo has its own rules.
And the solo mode was designed by David Tercy, I believe.
It was overseen by David Tercy.
Okay.
So he consulted with Ricky and provided a lot of sort of the drive, because Ricky is
Ricky.
I'm sorry.
Who is the Ricky that designed the solo?
Oh, Ricky Gaynor, the primary designer of the game.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Ricky Gaynor. Sorry, I always know him as Ricky. 2-player has sort of a luck-based variant and a more tactical variant. 3-player is sort of your normal game, as is 5-player. And then 4-player can be a normal game, but I think what we're proudest about, or at least I'm proudest about with that mode of the game, is I think there's a really amazing partnership mode that it just kind of upends the gameplay as you know it. Again, same core mechanic, but really makes it into an equally thinky but much more social experience as you work with your partner to defeat the other team.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, I mean, abstract strategy is not something I usually cover. It's not something I was like, oh, give me abstract strategy in my life. But, we are the One Stop Crush podcast. We cover a lot of solo. Someone might be excited that because there aren't that many. There are, like people say, okay, you can't play chess solo. That's just like two-sided. But we do have some things that are in the abstract strategy vein that are beginning to come for the solo. And with David Tercey overseeing it, I think he's one of the preeminent solo designers. So like we hear his name. And all right. So then that is the laying it out what this game is. Okay. So then we have the blog, and we'll get to the blog in a second. So Richard Yainer posted a blog at BGG maybe about 3 weeks ago at this point. It describes some things about the development of the games, like kind of telling the story of the game. It's one of the things that the blog did. So then I'm going to just be referring to some notes over here. So I apologize if I'm looking down.
Yeah, no.
Okay, so then the origin of Garinto is that didn't start off as Garinto. It started off as a different abstract strategy game with a different publisher, who the publisher approached Mike Fitzgerald and said, okay, I need a game about with an Indonesia theme. It's like, okay, I don't know anything about Indonesia. So like they neither white man Mike Fitzgerald or white man Ricky Yainer knew about Indonesia. So it's like, okay, let's figure this out. Came up with this game. That fell apart. The relationship fell apart with the publisher. It's like, okay, I have this game though. Games don't go away. And it's like, okay, let's get a new theme. Transferred it to this kind of like Japanese philosophy 5 elements type deal. So like, the fire and the water and all that kind of stuff. And then I think at that point, Grand Gamers Guild saw the game. After that great theme.
Yeah, my web developer at the time, a lady who lives in the same state, same general area as Ricky. They share like a playtest group, and she was traveling back and forth between her home and my home as she, basically helped me lay the foundation for my company. I would not be anything without her talent set, thank goodness. But and so she talked to Ricky and brought the game out to me, and from a description before I'd even played, I was already figuratively salivating, because it just, having the cartoon TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender is just core to my kids' childhood. I mean, that was family TV viewing. And then obviously this is not IP branded, but to have a game whose foundation was a particular Buddhist philosophy in terms of like elemental type stuff, really resonated with my soul. And then I actually played the game, and I was just, it was, it did what the best games do. Incredibly simple in execution, but still really good decisions, right? I mean, there's a few things you can do, and out of those, the choices arise. And to be fair, we actually in the development really reduced the cognitive load of the game. It was very different. We don't need to go into that necessarily, but obviously, like every game, it undergoes development to hone it down to the game that we eventually published.
Okay. All right. So then that's the point where it's like, okay, you honed it down and then you kickstarted it, right? Mm-hmm. A successful Kickstarter, and then on and on, and now it's like kind of reaching the world. So. Mm-hmm. Before we get to the blog, what was the encounter on Kickstarter from folks? Did you were folks kind of like saying, about the theme, about like, were you getting a little bit of smattering about like, okay, what's going on here? Or was there excitement? It's like, wow, this is, it's because it's a beautiful game. So like, wow, this is really beautiful and everything. So like, I mean, give us a sense for like, at least before that blog happened, what some of your feedback was.
Right. And to be honest with you, in the scope of the Kickstarter presentation, in the scope of what we're here to talk about, there was 100% zero comment. No email, no Kickstarter-based email, because they have an internal system. Right. No social media questioning, no comment on the campaign about what we were presenting. Again, everyone has their perspective, but I mean, from from a presentation standpoint, in terms of setting the game in a culture that's not my own, I didn't really view it as any different than a game like Azul, you know?
Okay. And so that's your mental context. It's like, I mean, you know, it's not like you're seeking out to make a game about like, you know, like, you know, picking out the most, you know, weirdo culture, whatever it is. It's like, this happens all the time. You know? Azul is a massively popular game, you know, and Azul, Spanish for blue. I mean, if you know where, I mean, maybe people play Azul, but they don't really like, they don't understand the theme at all, but like, it is really, there's a cultural background to it. And that is part of the appeal. Even if it's operating in kind of a subconscious level, like, you know, you're not aware of the, you know, the Spaniard descent of Azul, it's there and it's part of the draw. So that's kind of the spirit in which you approach Garinto, and no pushback. Yeah.
I think Azul, and I don't have the rule book in front of me or anything, I think it's more Portuguese based than Spain.
The Iberian, I use the word Iberian.
Yeah, but obviously geographically those places are next to one another. There's tremendous cultural exchange over hundreds, thousands of years. Right. So
yeah, we're going to go with Iberian on that one. Thank you for correcting me.
No,
cool. All right. So now, you know, and this is a common practice. The designer will put a blog on ostensibly to, you know, as promo, right? So like, I mean, we like to know the behind the scenes of games. So then, you know, the designer, Ricky, put a blog on. And the blog did a couple of things. One, it described the background, the development of the game, which I always find valuable. And then there was a decision on his part to kind of weave in some kind of like comments, you know, like observations about Indonesian culture, which was the original theme of the game, not the theme now, but the original theme of the game. And that's, I think, where people kind of got a little salty because the observations were, you know, I use the word racist on my video and I will own that word. Not that the person is racist. No, but I don't call people racist. Please. That is not what I do. That is a no-go for me, but the observations, right? You know, they export cat poop tea and they fight each other, you know, with spears and blah, blah, blah. So like, it was, you know, like that, I really kind of set people off. Yeah. Okay.
And I'm not nearly as well versed in this as you are, I'm sure, but I think there was, an unintentional othering in the way they were pointed out. Correct. You know, which obviously was received in the way it was received.
Correct. Yeah, that's basically that's probably the best way. You know, I don't know if everybody knows what the word othering is, very academic word, but yes, you know, it was a very othering. I use the word Orientalism. You know, Orientalism it's such a complicated thing, but boiling it down, it is regarding other cultures according to the most exotic, most, you know, standout thing, and kind of as a way of, you know, not acknowledging the other humanity and the, you know, the complexity of other cultures, just kind of like going towards these, what I call circus freaks, right? So like making the Indian call look like a bunch of circus freaks. Didn't like it. We posted it. And so like, just, you know, I don't know if you ever put like an official statement about the blog, but like, I mean, just to kind of lay it out there, like, what did you think of just the blog itself? And then we'll get into the reaction of the blog after that.
Sure. So in some ways, so I read the blog after it was already published. Ricky had sent it to me, but I was otherwise distracted. And he's like, it's up. And I'm like, okay, go for it. And I actually shared it on my own Facebook page. And then I got to it. I can't honestly remember the timeline. Later that day, the next day, something like, when the reaction started happening, let's put it like that, which was probably within a couple hours, is when I finally saw
it. It was not slow.
No. So my initial reaction was actually a non-reaction. And I think that's because of my familiarity with Ricky. And I could hear his voice as he was in the writing. And so knowing him, having worked with him pretty closely for, you know, almost 2 years, you know, I knew what he was writing. And it actually took me a few readings to parse the, to use the phrase I used 2 minutes ago, to parse what was pulled out as the unintentional othering from the message he was trying to deliver. You know, I know Ricky, he's, you know, the intent was there, you know, but it was, what's the phrase? I think it's from Stephen Covey. We judge ourselves by our intentions and we judge others by their actions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, no one, and you put something out on the internet and then it's just this wall, right? And then everyone gets to react to it to their own subjective interpretation. And it's not a dialogue, except in the sense that in a case like this, you start trying to do damage control, and it's not a real-time conversation, and it's very hard to make your points clear. And you're right, I did not react to it. I sort of watched it play out, and then it was honestly very quickly removed. Ricky and I discussed it. He wrote to Eric Martin, Eric pulled it, and boom, it was done. And what's funny about the whole thing, Jason, I mean, not funny, but you'd mentioned
noteworthy, yeah.
You'd mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that there was some outrage on Twitter. And I mean, I'm not a big person on Twitter, but obviously if somebody ats me, it should ping on my, you know what I mean? Like, and not a single one. So here's a situation. And I literally just found, I mean, I'd heard someone else say a couple of days ago that there was some controversy about this on Twitter as well. And the only thing that kept going through my head is, why is no one adding me? Why is no one getting in touch with me? Why is no one having a conversation with me? And prior to us even beginning to talk, had a conversation with my graphic designer on the project, and pretty serious conversation, because he said that people were coming to him questioning his motives, questioning his integrity, questioning his character. And I said to him, why are they not coming to me? Why is no one having a conversation with me? And because, I mean, Josh Capel is an amazing, talented guy, and his character and values are unassailable, in my opinion. And I just could not understand it. Where all this conversation, this entire dance was happening around the circumstances, and no one was talking to me directly. And I even told Josh, I'm like, hey man, any of these people who are talking to you, give them my phone number and email. I will have a conversation with anyone about what our intentions were, how they played out, and what happened. And so far, Jason, thank you. You are the first and only person who has reached out to me.
There was another, but I'm not going to reveal that person, and they had a conversation with you as well. So, just to kind of put it out there that there were some others.
You know what? I think I know who that is, and we'll let that person remain nameless. They're not here, so
right, they're not here. So, but like it's not like it was barren.
Right.
Anyway, but not as, I mean, there were a fair number of criticism from a number of quarters, not a lot of like ats, and I mean, I don't want to get too far down those weeds. I think that social media has kind of taught us some negative things about like DMs are your friend and ats are your friend, and direct conversation is your friend. But I don't want to say that in a shaming way, because I think on kind of a progressive side, not that I don't hide that. I'm a progressive minded person. I think on this side, there is this sense of like, again and again and again and again and again. And like, at some point, maybe it, previous conversations have been tried by other publishers and it hasn't gone well. So it just becomes this kind of like, almost like a miasma feeling of like, okay, here we go again. And it's like, okay, we're going into it and trying to express as best we can and trying to reach our audience as best we can. I'm not that I'm excusing it, but I'm just kind of like, giving a little context for the mind frame of like, okay, why wouldn't we reach out to this person? Mm-hmm. I'm not excusing. I think we should. And obviously I think we should. That's the reason why you're here. And also, and this is not something that anybody in content I ever saw content creation did, but like, we can't control the wider community, right? And like, I really did see comments of like, garbage human beings that made this game or whatever it is. And like, and that, at that point, it's like, no, that is a human being that is listening to that comment. These are real people to me. So it's like, okay, that is something I have to shut down. Even if I disagree with what happened, which we'll talk about, the ascribing, the name calling and all that kind of stuff is like, okay, that is a red line for me, no go.
Right. You can be unhappy with a person's actions and still recognize their human life value. At the end of the day, that is what we all have in common. And it's important to preserve that as part of any conversation.
Right. So, I mean, by the way, if people haven't figured this out, there's going to be a lot of nuance in this conversation. So if you're washing your pet while listening to this, or if you're doing something else, multitasking, I would recommend you put this down, because we're going to enter into some nuance. Now we're really going to get into it. Right. Okay. The blog happened. The author apologized. I followed the comments, the apology is right there. Sorry if I offended anybody that was out of line, whatever. So like, I'm going to put that aside. I'm going to put that totally aside, right? Because it raises another, I think, deeper, more interesting issue. So then a deeper criticism that a lot of folks, and I also have the same criticism, is the idea of a pace it on theme. Like it is, you mentioned before, like you actually said it in your description, this is a lightly themed game. So it's like, okay, you were looking at Garinto, Japanese people, And then, there was a thread that said, okay, the designer wanted 5 things. There are a million things that have 5 things, that have 5 LSB to be, I come from New York. We have 5 boroughs. Like, why couldn't it be about New York, climbing the mountain, climbing Washington Heights in New York? That would have been cool for me. But it seems like there is a reflexive instinct among publishers to reach for these, cultural themes. I should say that, cultural themes. So that was the deeper criticism. It's like, I feel like there was this fatigue of like, okay, we're talking about this again. This is, so I think you started to go to where your criticism was, but let's kind of dive into that. What did you think? What do you think about that particular criticism, that this is a pasted on theme and that, a certain segment of the community is tired of it?
Sure. So, again, you're talking to someone who, grew up on Saturday morning cartoons, was sort of a big kid throughout his life. And again, was definitely tapping into my love and appreciation for Avatar: The Last Airbender, sort of hovering in the background of my mind as this game was presented and then taken to next steps. When I say lightly themed, I think it's more in the context of the fact that any game that's abstract is lightly themed, right? Even let's use the current granddaddy of abstract games, Azul, could have been anything else. What I will say is that when the game was presented with the Japanese elemental theme attached to it, it wasn't completely detached. And what I mean by that is, if you know the game mechanically, you're moving around tiles that have identities as elements. And so, like, when you use a water tile, water is in waves, right? Waves are horizontal, so you collect horizontally. When you move a fire tile, you have like a column of fire, so you're collecting up the column of fire. When you're using an earth tile, earth goes downwards. You're digging into the pile. Wind. You have the. And again, I'm not a mythological scholar in any way, but you have, like, from Greek mythology, you have the winds, and the east wind and the west wind. So you're collecting tiles, north, south, east, west, and then, at least at the time, the remaining element is void, and that became diagonal because the idea was like, void is this amorphous thing that sort of interweaves the fabric, and that was the pattern left to us. So, you could probably still accuse that of being very lightly themed, but there was a logic to it. It's not as if it was completely arbitrary and we spun a wheel of cultures and that was the one that came up. It wasn't that type of a thing. That's
what it felt like. It felt like, okay, let's spin the wheel. And it was actually in the designer blog where the publisher came up for the original publisher for that original game, said, well, I want to get on Indonesia. Why?
Right. And I think it said that started out as a Mancala type mechanism, which obviously Garinto is not even close to that in any way. I guess what it comes down to is, I can't speak to the motivations of that publisher. Grand Gamers Guild, who is me, has never started a game process like that. Not from a cultural perspective. There are a few things I want in this life. Like, for instance, you may be familiar with one of my games, the Artemis Project, and I'd really love a game that is based on, like, a Dyson sphere. And I've talked to a few people and said, hey, can you make me that game? But that's obviously science fiction based, not cultural based, totally different, perspective or foundation is probably a better word. So yeah, I guess, again, just to summarize, I don't know why that original publisher came to Ricky with that, or to Mike, actually, I guess, with that. Mike, I can only say, and in fact, until the blog, I never knew that bit of history. I was only ever presented a Japanese elemental, in at the time it was a card game. We made them into tiles. So,
okay. All right, so the context is, and I'm a guy, we're talking about this because I want to distinguish Grand Gamers Guild from publishers, or like white male publishers. Like, everybody has a different story, right? So that, I think it raises 2 independent questions, and I'll take them one at a time. So I think there are, as I have gotten into this work and work with more publishers, especially people who are working in Euro games, European publishers or American publishers of European games, abstract games, that kind of thing. Games that are famously don't need a theme, right? Or like, you don't need to know the theme in order to play the game. there is an attitude that it really is spin the wheel. Like, okay, I'm just going to borrow from Indonesia. I'm going to borrow from here. I'm going to borrow from here. Because that is so pervasive, it makes even a Grand Gamers Guild where it sounds like there's more intention, right? Even a Grand Gamers Guild kind of is playing with the third rail a little bit because of that larger context of like so many other publishers just kind of like spinning the culture wheel and slapping whatever hasn't been done yet on there. So I'd like to hear your thoughts. Like, should white publishers or white male publishers, whatever have you, be making these culturally themed games that are from non-white cultures?
Do I think they should be spinning the wheel and Price is Right style? Absolutely not. Yeah, I'm going to go in a slightly different direction here. And I don't expect to change the industry based on this, but I really don't like the word theme. As someone who sort of had a, English education based in the United States, very literary based, like theme applies in my mind, always has, to the underlying messages of a story that you get out of a narrative. Okay. I don't think hardly any games have a theme, even though the parlance that we use is a colloquialism, right? It's this game is this and this game is that. That's the theme. I really think of it more as story. Again, I don't expect to change the entire industry, but I think the power of games comes in their ability to tell a story. Okay, every story has a setting. A good story has themes, things like that. And so I think what happens is, at least in my experience, when you were talking, I was partially going through my mind, thinking about the games I've published and the way we presented them versus how they were presented to us. So I think a designer comes to a publisher and they have a story that they want to tell. And then they couch those mechanisms in that story. And as a publisher, you then have a choice, right? You can buy that story, and then follow through on it artistically, mechanically, whatever the case may be, or you could change that story. The story that was presented to me with Garinto was a Japanese set story. The story that was presented to me with Pocket Ops, a very different game, a tic-tac-toe variant style game, was a different story. And, in developing that game with my lead developer, Josh, we changed the story that was told. So, but to actually answer your question, do I think that anyone has the right to tell any story? I think everyone has the right to do whatever they want, right? You can do anything you want in this world. You just have to be willing to accept the consequences, good, bad, or otherwise. I think that a good publisher who, cares about the process from the designer to the customer, those bookends, okay, and how they present themselves, is going to do everything in their power to tell that story with as much respect as possible. Mm-hmm. So, and yeah, we're in a time where there are a lot of stories being told. I mean, thousands of games are published every year. Some of them are told with care, and some of them are slapdash jobs. I like to think that we took as much care as possible with every game, but for the subject of this conversation, Garinto, and that, the lessons learned from this conversation will be taken further ahead. So, I mean, we have another game right now on Kickstarter called Aldabas, set in a non-white culture, on which, again, we had a cultural consultant, we had a Colombian artist, and made, again, took as much care as we thought appropriate to make sure that we were telling the story we wanted to tell with respect to the culture behind it.
Okay. All right. Okay. So yes, but is the answer to that question. It's like, okay, should a white publisher feel free to, making some non-white cultures? And it's like, okay, yes, but there are things, right? Hire a culture consultant, and I'll get to that. That's actually further down my little outline here.
Sure.
How to approach cultural consultants. A lot of talk about cultural consultants because I don't know if you're following what's happening with Isaac Childress and Frosty.
Yeah.
Hired a cultural consultant, blogged all about it, and people are not happy. So I want to address that. Okay. So then, yes, but be respectful. Yes, but be intentional. And I think I will take you at your word. Not every game. We both reject spinning the wheel. We both reject the cultural IP that just like is like nothing splatdash, whatever. So what your position is, okay, be respectful. Hire from if you hire consultants or artists, something like that, try to get as close to the culture as possible, and then go do your thing. Okay, so that's proper respect and proper representation. That's great. We're both on the same page. So I would like to advance us. That's the 101 class. Be respectful. I would like to advance us to the 201 class for a second.
Sure.
Okay. So what I have observed watching what's going on in terms of white publishing houses designing non-white cultures, it tends to be one of two things. It tends to be either exotic things or dead things. So so we talked about I have to pick on you. You're right here. So aldabas, right? Aldabas is Colombian. It is the word for door knocker. And it is a, ancient, big old artistic door knockers, and, has a whole cultural story around, I guess it evokes like dungeons and ancient doors and ancient craft, all that kind of thing. Okay. So then if I am a Colombian person, I'm not a Colombian person, but that's kind of within my realm. I'm looking at it and I'm going, pardon my French, I don't give a shit about door knockers. Like, I'm a living person. If I'm going to have Colombia on my game, I want it to be something that is living, something that is respect, something that acknowledges something that is happening now, or that has happened that reflects struggle. So let's say you're talking about Colombian, like, I don't know, I know you don't make war games, but like, let's say you're making like, some revolutions that have happened. They've struggled with socialism and all this kind of thing, like something where our peoples have agency, not the exotic stuff or the dead stuff. So then you can make anything you want, but we are observing that when we let you make everything you want, certain things are emerging that does not reflect our genuine voice. So what do you think of that?
So with speaking to the ongoing aldabas, we've actually had, so one of the comments we got is, it's so nice to see something about Colombian culture that's so positive. I will challenge your notion about the historical nature of the aldabas, because they are around and in the city today. I mean, granted, it's not like you have a new aldaba produced for your home to reflect your profession as someone living now. But, from what I understand, not having visited Cartagena myself, but working with people who do live and work there.
Cartagena is actual city in Colombia. Right there. Yeah. Right now. Here we are.
Right. Is that you can walk around the city and see these things as, on homes that were populated by those people when that was a social cultural marker that had import. So I don't think we're dealing with, and I apologize for the barking dogs.
We're used to it here on Shelf Stories.
What was that?
We're used to it here on Shelf Stories. Barking dogs, running kids.
the Zoom of our lives. So it is a living thing. Albeit it's there's more sort of history to it than currentness to it in terms of what it is. And I feel like I've lost the thread of the other part of your question.
Well, okay, so I mean, so you say it's a living thing, and you have gotten
comments
saying, okay, just to kind of reset the conversation in case somebody else has lost the thread.
Sure.
So my thing is, okay, when we trust white publishers, the tendency is to make either exotic things or dead things, right? And so, okay, aldabas are current, right? They're right there, and people use them, but it's still a kind of an exotic thing, right?
True.
Like you look at the cover of the box is like this lion head, and it's like, okay, I totally get that, and I'll take it of people who say like, okay, I want my culture represented in a positive way. I feel the same way personally about like Teotihuacan and like the tea games. Like, I'm actually really happy that like I can teach my white friends how to pronounce Teotihuacan, which I have known for my entire life, and I've been teaching them, and like the different other like games in that line, Zolkeen and everything. But the observation is when we trust white people, white publishers, European publishers, they'll go to either the past thing or in the striking thing, which kind of brings up that Orientalist thing. It's like, okay, the thing I notice about you is a thing that's weird, not the thing that is like just regular human. So just to kind of, I hope that resets the conversation. I want to lead into what you were going to say.
Right. I mean, I guess to be honest with you, I mean, the door knockers themselves are ornate. They have social and cultural meaning. But I don't know that I would consider them that exotic. I mean, people have door knockers today. They're just a lot more function over form. but everyone knows what a door knocker is. It's just taking this tool and giving some, life to it within a game system. Again, what had happened, to give a little bit of the story, is one of the designers in his daytime profession was working with a team that had come to the United States from Colombia, happened to mention, hey, I am doing a game based on this. And the gentleman got all excited. He says, I collect those. I study those. I know about those. This is amazing. And so, and that gentleman became our consultant. One of the things we did in the game is originally we had used a European crown symbol to represent points, and we changed it to, and this is not the correct term, but it begins with a P, and I just don't remember the term anymore. But basically, a more historically accurate crown that was reflective of Colombian culture. So because it just seemed like the correct thing to do, and we ran that by him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, this nailed it." So I understand what you're saying. However, and I can't speak to the motivations of other publishers. I can't speak to the results of other publishers. I can only know the process that we go through. And if at any point we had found that there was a negative bent to this, we would have pulled up stakes and moved on in some form or fashion, applied a different story to it, changed artwork, whatever needs to be done, or perhaps abandoned the system entirely and said, hey, you know what, this just doesn't feel like a Grand Gamers Guild game anymore.
Okay. So then, on the individual level, I think like you can kind of look at something like this. And we talked about this with Garinto, right? You look at Garinto as an individual game. There's certain things, like there was more intention in it than in other things. Like, the water goes or like horizontal, fire goes I can't talk anymore. Water goes horizontally, fire goes vertically, all that kind of stuff. And on an individual level, you can kind of say, okay. And then like, a project like Aldabass is like, okay, cultural, hired a cultural consultant. It's a bunch of white people making the game. I like to call it a caucus of Caucasians. So the caucus of Caucasians has descended upon and produced this thing. And you did the best you could within that context, hired a consultant, change things depending on their voice. That's great. Believe me, that is great. So to me, we were literally done with Aldabas in terms of the way we presented it. And then, my graphic designer put his nose to the grindstone and swapped all those elements out so that they would be shown in their changed state. We wanted it to be presented as accurately as to the final product and our intentions as possible. Okay. And there is that's, if you're going to do it in terms of the representation and respect, following the 101 basic stuff, that's fine. And I get you that you can't own the intentions of other publishers. I guess like where we're trying to say is like, okay, we're looking at it like the larger context of like, games that are made, right? So like, if I'm getting Colombian culture, I'm getting door knockers. If I'm getting, Egyptian culture, chances are real good, I'm getting pyramids and, pharaohs and stuff. If I'm getting Africa, I'm getting diamond mines. If I'm in Japan, I'm getting, pagodas. If I'm getting these either inanimate things or dead things. And so there is a kind of cumulative effect that, and as I spoke about that before when talking about like, why we get so mad. We're not necessarily reacting to the individual thing, or reacting to the kind of the cumulative, like this is a habit now that this is what we get. And on the individual level, I don't want to take away anything from your commenter or anybody else that says this is awesome for me. There is another way of thinking about it where that kind of reveals a deeper problem that your current approach doesn't quite get at.
Right. Let me add something to that. When you get Jewish things, you get Holocaust stories, as if that is the defining thing of every Jewish life individually. I
don't like that either.
No, exactly. There's a lot more to it, and I'm just bringing that point up because as a Jewish person, that's the locus from which we're all expected to opine and operate, and anyway, keep going please.
Well, sure, I'll pull from that. Like, there's a massive difference between a game of like, look, like, let's just say, like, take a cute thing, a menorah, right? You know, like, I mean, I'm going to make a Jewish game and I'm going to like spin a dreidel and put on a menorah. Or I could make a game from the Jewish heritage and talk about, you know, the Siege of Maccabees, which is like this active thing that, like, you know,
Yeah.
a really dramatic story that would be actually be a pretty cool motif for a game. Or, and I know this gets into like, you know, some really difficult things, but I mean, games don't only have to be fun. They could also be instructive. Like we get war games, like, you know, we get a actual area control game of the Israel-Palestine conflict, which is, it is an area control game kind of writ large. That's all it is. So it's like, you know, in a way, like it's asking for that. It's asking for like, let's look at that stuff and like let's cut out the games about menorahs. You know, does that make sense?
I understand what you're getting at.
And so, not that, okay, I'm like pinning you, Mark Spector, you must commit to this, just to give you and the audience something to kind of think about when it comes to why this blog kind of touched the nerve that it did.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I totally understand what you're saying.
Okay. So yeah, just that and that's what it's all about. Just kind of process and kind of look into it. And thank you very much for kind of talking about that other aspect of it. I'm on Shelf Stories. I love culture.
Sure. I want to throw one other thing out there, and I don't know if this would come up later or whatever the case may be, but the publishing of Garinto and the blog is obviously just one ping on the Grand Gamers Guild radar in the industry that will, you know, hopefully have a duration into the future of indeterminate length. You know, and as you pointed out, there were people who were attacking us personally, right, that attacked us as people as a function of this one thing, without acknowledgement of many of the other things that I've done to be progressive and forward thinking and representative. And again, I don't know if we're going to wrap around to this in any way. I certainly don't want to come off as, you know, defensive, because because believe me, I know
you're doing pretty good so far. I've had a lot of these interviews, and you're a little bit progressed beyond the usual, like, oh no, I'm not. Please, you're doing pretty good.
But I guess what I'm asking is, or saying is, I don't know if it's time to speak to some of those things,
sure. Yeah.
Whatever the case may be. So, I mean, you know, just some things that we've attempted to do in terms of representation. I mean, obviously, like you pointed out, Endangered is on the shelf right behind you. You know,
I love this game.
We took great pains in that game to make the cast of human characters on a current event multi-ethnic and you know, multi-gendered. You know, originally it was presented also as a you were trying to convince U.S. senators to enact legislation. And I pushed back to Joe, the designer, and I said, first of all, these animals are not U.S. based. And second of all, saving endangered species is a worldwide problem. So you're not talking about a bunch of old white men who need to adjudicate on this. You know, when you're trying to convince the UN, we went that direction because these animals are in other countries and are represented by literally other flags in the game. You know what I mean? You know, another thing we did early in the pandemic, you know, using that as our benchmark for time, is we updated our my website to reflect our feelings on Black Lives Matters. You know, we have a statement there about that. One of the things you might be aware that I do also is we change our logo to pay homage to current events. We have a diversity logo that we put up in, you know, at culturally appropriate times when that is in the cultural zeitgeist. We rotate that through, you know, so representation does matter. And I like to think that I've done the best I can to put that in the places that it's appropriate in my games, on my website, on my social media, and things like that. And there are other things I do that, you know, I guess I just prefer to keep personal because, you know, I do have a little bit of a philosophical issue with putting too many feathers in my cap. I try to just do what I do and do the best I can, and not look for accolades and, you know, and to have other people than me pat me on the back for it. So, but in the context of this conversation, I thought it was, you know, appropriate to sort of broaden the view on some of the things that we've tried to do to be current and respectful and things like that.
So, you know, you do the things, and I see your Facebook, you have your Black Lives Matter and all kind of stuff. Should that make you immune to criticism?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it should, if nothing else, I think it should show my commitment to awareness and my ongoing commitment. No one's immune to criticism. I mean, we still criticize things that are, hundreds of years old, games, books, literature. Things have to be taken in their context, in the current context, and then in their future context. And then everyone makes their decision about them as a function of that.
So, and that's where our kind of thought is that I think there are some folks that kind of believe that, even if they'll never say it directly, that, I do the things, right? I have done this. I've hired the consultant. I've done whatever. And so why are you adding me? Why are you coming at me? Why this flame? Why this, why this? And so there's that, like you mentioned before, that defensiveness, right? That kicks in. And it's like, again, I said it before, I'll say it again. I'll keep on saying it. Criticism is not cancellation. We're not trying to cancel you. Are we a little bit loud and agitated? Yes, because there is again, diamond mines in Africa, pyramids in Egypt, pagodas. Like these are the games that we're seeing. And it's like on its own, they seem okay. But it's like for people who really want to see for whom we care. And, it's like we have this sense that like, okay, why care so much? It's only games. I don't tell you what to care about. You don't tell me what I care about, and I care about representation. I care about, having living things, living people, living motifs in my games. I care. Sorry. And I'm trying to express it in a way, and maybe this is kind of my thing, trying to express it in a way that is constructive. Like I always say, I want more games, not less. And so there is a frustration there. So it's like, but I try to channel that frustration positively. I try to channel it so it's not the thing and not the person. Right. So.
Right. You have done an excellent job of respecting that human life value. We can criticize the actions, but we need to respect the person, and their life value.
Right. Okay. So, so we can move past that. Like, I mean, I've logged my criticism about door knocker games, and that's something for you to process. So then there's another kind of question. I mentioned 2 questions. Here's the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a question of like motivation, about like why publishers just like because we could talk about the ethics of it, but then it's just like it takes for granted, like, okay, they're doing it. Why are they doing it? Like, why are we constantly getting these cultural games? If they come in, sometimes they're respectful, sometimes they're not, sometimes they paste it on, sometimes they're not, but we're constantly getting it. Kickstarters about Trinidad is like, I feel like every place has a game. Why? Like there are millions of themes. The themes abound all over the place. Like you can make a game, like you could tell a story. I know you don't like the word theme, but you can tell a story about virtually anything.
Yep.
Right. And so it's like, if you have this whole wide field of criticism, why is it that, again, I'll go back to it, my caucus of Caucasians, my white designers, why pull from those themes over and over and over again? It's boring. Like, at least we find it boring. There has to be some reason on the publisher side why it keeps happening. Maybe you can kind of fill me in on that part of things.
I'll be honest, that's a really big question. There are probably people who've studied this who would have much better answers than me. My initial reaction is, we live in a big, beautiful world. And there's so many stories to tell. And finding something that is not part of your mental scheme, and then setting a foundation for yourself, and then building a story around it, in this case, a game, gives you the opportunity to, dip your toes in the water of that story. Maybe it will result in you traveling to that place. Maybe it's because you traveled to that place.
Let's start there. We'll go there. So, okay. I love culture, and I love more games about culture. So like the issue isn't that we're making games about culture. The issue is like the instinct seems to be, okay, let's say just the theoretical example of I visit a place and I'm going to make a game about it. Why can't the instinct be, okay, I'm going to visit a place and now I'm going to partner with somebody who knows the place better, and then we're going to agree to make the game together, or I'll agree to help this person realize their vision. So that is not happening. And and not only is that not that it's not happening, but like it's a struggle. Like it really is. It's a struggle. Like every single win was like, oh, we finally got one more win. So it's like that's kind of what we would want to see happen. Where it's like we want more games, but like if you go to a place, then and it comes out of a sense of appreciation, which is like you mentioned before you love the Last Airbender, so there was an appreciation element there, right? So if it comes out of place appreciation, you know, and this is as an unfair question, but I'll just pose it anyway. Why can't there be more of an instinct to say, okay, I appreciate this place, let me partner with somebody and make something together, as opposed to I want to make a game about this?
Sure. So, I mean, I guess let's just use the two concrete examples we've discussed. With respect to Garinto, you are correct. There was not a direct through line there to bring that to life. But with Aldabas, there very much was. So it can be done. And, you know,
should be done.
Could be done. And if if going forward, a publisher is smart about what he or she chooses, having that through line is something they should choose to do.
And this is where the cynical part comes in. And this is where the mad comes in, where there is not that partnership, where there is just the white publisher deciding to make that game without partnership. The assumption on our side has become, and I think that has borne out more often than not, is that it is for sales. Like, well, these games sell more, these games appeal more. I can make games look prettier, and people will have more resonance. And so it's like, and that where we get into the real issue of appropriativeness. Like a game is not affirming, it's appropriating. And so that's where we like, oh, that's why you're doing it. If you're not partnering, that means that you want to just kind of extract and keep it for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we are a consumer-driven industry, right? The goal is to sell a product. I think, the onus is on us as publishers to elevate our consciousness and how we implement that product. So, and I would like to think, although I don't know. No, let me just say it this way. Me and my company will continue to push in that direction. And I can only hope that others will as well. And honestly, others who have a much bigger platform than me, because I am tiny. I throw pebbles in the pond. There are people who heave boulders, It's
where it starts, though. It's where it starts. It's where it starts. Like, I mean, Isaac Childress designed the biggest game at forever, and he watches this show. I know he'll watch this. I know he'll watch this conversation. I know he's kind of already bought in, but like if someone like an Isaac Childress can watch, others can too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, right. He's a boulder heaver. Absolutely.
whether he likes it or not.
Yeah.
Hi, Isaac.
Yeah, with success.
Well, I mean, okay, so and again, I have I don't want to like kind of like put you on the wall for like other publishers, but like there is an anger. There is of like, okay, you are appropriating, you're basically treating, Japanese cultures or, a non-white cultures as you would a Cthulhu, as you would like, a Sherlock Holmes, like an open source IP that is like, oh, there's no license on it. Okay, I can do whatever I want. And there is there's a sense of like, we are done with that because, not that we own the IP in a capitalist sense, but like we do own it in a emotional sense. And so please be more respectful, and please do that more respectful at a baseline, and then please partner with us as often as possible so that we can, if you want to make that game, and if not, make a game about the 5 boroughs of Brooklyn or whatever. Make a game about like some abstract thing. I don't care. Okay, so then just to kind of drill down, I mentioned about cultural consulting. So let's drill down a little bit more on that. So tell me about your approach when it comes to hiring a cultural consultant, how you think about cultural consultants.
Well, I think basically if you are approaching a story that is, this is a really broad brush, but let's just say not your story to tell. It's important to find someone who's an authoritative source and make sure that you are approaching that story with respect, with thoroughness, and telling it in a way that whether or not a person who's on the receiving end of that content, again, book, painting, in this case, game, will hopefully not find issue with it. Because at the end of the day, all of us have subjective faculties, right? The joke from a comedian might offend you that doesn't offend me, or vice versa, right? We all have our own experiences. I think it's impossible to believe that every bit of content we put out is going to hit everyone in the right way. You can just do the best you can and go from there, and then hope that anyone who does take issue with it is willing to have a conversation and explain where it hit them wrong.
Mm-hmm. So then, I mean, you're dancing between kind of two issues there, and dancing. That's a bad word, but like in terms of you're touching two issues. So then, one is like, okay, a cultural consultant can kind of make a game better, tell a better story, like tell a more resonant story, tell a more nuanced story, and get into the weeds that you would never see as from your perspective as a white male who's never been to Cartagena, who's never been to other places. So like that's like the positive way to look at it. The negative way to look at it is that you hire a culture consultant to make the SJWs happy, to avoid criticism. And I've actually gotten this. I've experienced this firsthand of like, someone will put on a Kickstarter.
Just experiencing it firsthand right now. There was no negative feedback, when at the end of the day, the goal is to put out the best game possible. It's making everyone happy in whatever perspective they're bringing to the argument is not a bad thing in any way. Whether it's the SJWs, to use your term, or it's the...
Oh, I don't like that term. Just like that's what the criticism is of people who hire cultural consultants. So, you're trying to make the SJWs happy. You're just trying to be woke.
Right. No. I mean, that is a result of doing the right thing, but it is not the motivation behind doing the right thing.
For some people, it is.
That's
the story I was going to tell. Like of
sure.
Looking at a Kickstarter, going like, and like contact the designer and like, asking the question. They say, well, I hired a culture consultant, leave me alone. Like blame him if it doesn't fall short. And it's like, why did you hire the culture consultant?
Right.
Did you hire the culture consultant to mute criticism, or did you hire the culture consultant to make your game better?
Right. And for those people, if that's their sole motivation, then they're living a diminished existence because they're not appreciating the richness that they could bring to their final product.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I we're on the same page. I just wanted to clarify for people.
Yeah,
because
totally.
I mean, and that was the thing when it came to the Frosthaven comments. And if you don't know about Frosthaven, just a quick background: Isaac Childress, maker of Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, has made Frosthaven, but then realized that the original Gloomhaven, published in 2016, but made years before, just presented it had a lot of races, and it presented a lot of difficult things about the races, very centralized, very stereotyped, just upon further reflection, and hired a cultural consultant to kind of help him work through all that and describe that in a blog, and got the response. Oh my God. The response was so like triggered and fragile. And I almost think, I think of it like the plaintive wail of whiteness. Like, no cancel. And that's all it was. I was like, you're canceling, you're making people happy. The cultural consultant is a grifter. It's a charlatan who's just there to make these mad people satisfy their bloodlust or whatever it is. There are people who really believe this stuff.
Yeah, it's
nuts to me. It's nuts.
Yeah.
I never want to call a person nuts, but like the whole situation, it drives me crazy.
When at the end of the day, Isaac is just trying to make the best game possible from any lens you view it through. And that should be the goal of every publisher, you can look through the literal lens of colorblindness, friendliness. You can look through the figurative lens of being culturally sensitive. There's a lot of different lenses. We all have our own lenses. And he just wants to put out the best game from every lens.
Right. I think
as do I. And,
I think so too. And that's the bottom line is like, and we care. And, just to kind of like, now we're coming to a kind of circle to the, kind of wrapping up the conversation. Like we care, sure. We do. And we're trying to express our care as in a way that isn't taking away anybody's stuff. The reason why you escape, the reason why you play, we're not going to make it like, oh, SJW, let's hit each other with pillows land. Like, we want to make better stories about war and everything that you come to games to do. It's just, there are aspects to it, like, birds in the saddle that can be removed. We're trying to remove them. There's resistance on the part of publishers. So it's not an easy process. It sounds loud, but at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make more and better games. And on your end, because you don't make like the bigger games, like you make like little games, and a lot you've made, I think your proclivity is towards like the abstract and the, small family weight in terms of Grand Gamers Guild. Is that correct?
Yeah, I have some medium weight games, and actually
small to medium. Yeah.
The way I approach things mostly is, for good or ill, it's really whatever tickles my sensibilities. My goal actually is to put out such a wide swath of experiences that you kind of look and go, oh, I can't believe these are from the same company. It does make it's an extra challenge to my success, in the sense that it's really hard to sort of sell Endangered and Garinto to the same person, but that's okay. I tell the stories.
You're not selling to this person. I know what team I'm on.
Fair enough.
Okay. So then, so this is done in a spirit. I have logged my criticism, and I hope that Mark, responds to those criticisms. I have done as best I can to articulate them and stand my grounds, because I really feel like I don't want to talk in an echo bubble. I want to hear and respond, as difficult as that can be sometimes. Anyway, so I do have criticism, and I will continue to have criticism. If Mark releases a game that something else happens, I'm going to continue to do that. But the channel is open to talk. We'll come right back on Shelf Stories. Hopefully, maybe next time, to talk about something happy. Talk about the next expansion to Endangered, or whatever else is happening. That would be amazing. You said?
Oh yeah, I would love that. I mean, yeah, I'm super proud of that product and the story that product tells. So absolutely.
Once I get my copy of New Species down here and I lay that down, you are welcome to come back on the show. We don't have to talk about any of this cultural stuff. We're going to talk about one of the best light cooperative games with an awesome theme that I have played in a long time. So that'd be cool. All right. So we'll end this off by just tell us, so Aldabas is live on Kickstarter, or did it end?
Aldabas, depending on, it's going to end on Tuesday the 18th. So we're funded.
The day we post the show is actually on Tuesday the 18th.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
we might just miss it, but I'll put up a social media post or something like that.
Sure.
So then, okay, yeah. Then more, like, you have more in the pipeline.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're following up on Aldabas. Will be our next journey into deep space with the Artemis Odyssey, a spin-off game from the Artemis Project. And then also, we're extremely excited to let people know that the Kringle Caper, which was our 18-card escape room game designed by Jonathan Schaffer, was so well received that we've decided to turn it into an entire line of games that we call Holiday Hijinks. So the next game in the series will be the Independence Incident, focused on, of course, the 4th of July. So pre-orders will be opening for that within days of when you drop this conversation.
All right. So this is Mr. Mark Spector. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. This was fantastic. I appreciate it.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world. So until next time, later, everybody.